emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Hello, I'm Calvin Robinson. Do not miss my Common Sense Crusade Saturdays at 7 p.m. Join me for some in-depth discussions on faith. Is that not the start of the slippery slope?
It's very much so.
And the big moral questions of the day. I'm baffled.
You've got some nerve.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, welcome back. I'm Bethany Elsey, keeping you up to date from the GB newsroom. Thousands have come together at big lunches across the UK to continue the celebrations of the King's coronation. The First Lady of the US, Jill Biden, was one of the special guests hosted by the Prime Minister and his wife outside Downing Street. Buckingham Palace have described the lunches as a nationwide act of celebration and friendship. Well, royal fans across the UK told us why they're getting involved.
It's lovely to see all the people and the balloons out and everything. Yeah, excellent.
It doesn't happen often enough to get people to get together, and they should. Like a day like this, great.
It's a very nice, creative thing to bring us all together to celebrate this, because it's a one-in-a-lifetime thing. I don't think I'm going to experience it again.
We think it's wonderful. There's so many people have come to support it, and we've even got, nice fine weather after all the rain.
And what did you make of the coronation?
We loved it. We loved every minute of it, especially seeing little Louis singing the national anthem all the way through.
Yeah, I was impressed, yeah. It makes you proud to be British, doesn't it?
Later this evening, 20,000 people will join the newly crowned King and Queen at Windsor Castle for the coronation concert. Earlier, the Prince and Princess of Wales surprised those queuing up for the event. And in the party spirit, William was heard jokingly asking people if they'd brought alcohol with them to celebrate. Ticket holders have already been making their way up the long walk to the castle, where organisers are making their final preparations. Take That, Katy Perry and Lionel Richie will all be performing, with special appearances from Tom Cruise, Dame Joan Collins and Sir Tom Jones. The host, Hugh Bonneville, says it's going to be a great night.
There are so many standout moments from what I've seen. There's a beautiful poem composed especially for the event. There's a remarkable finale, both visually and orally, and some astonishing pop performances along the way, and as well as classical performances from Andrea Bocelli and Sabrina Terfel. So I think there really is something for everyone tonight. It's going to be magical.
Amnesty International says the Metropolitan Police may have misused new powers after 52 people were arrested ahead of the coronation yesterday. The force says they were taken into custody for an array of offences in line with relevant legislation. The chief executive of anti-monarchy group Republic, Graham Smith, was held for nearly 16 hours. He claims there's no longer a right to protest in the UK after the Public Order Bill was passed earlier this year. Amnesty International's policing expert, Oliver Freely-Sprague, agrees.
We are being told that we were being told that we were preventing serious disruption. The laws and the powers that they've been using are defining that serious disruption as people in yellow T-shirts holding placards. Is that really the kind of country you want to live in, where people who've had a long tradition since the suffragettes onwards of standing for what they believe in? Do we really want to see people being arrested for holding placards? I think no.
But Culture Secretary Lucy Fraser told GB News that the new powers are there to be used.
We brought in some legislation and the police said they needed more powers, so we've given them and I think then the police have to use their operational powers, their intelligence to make the right decisions and the right calls on the day.
You're up to date on TV, online, DAB+ radio and on TuneIn. This is GB News.
Well, good morning and welcome to the Camilla Tominey Show, live from Buckingham Palace. Lots to come today, of course, in our coronation special. Justice Secretary and first man to be knighted by Charles after he became king joins me now, Robert Buckland. Lovely to see you, Sir Robert.
Lovely to be here.
I must call you that. Now tell me, what was it like to be the first man to be knighted by King Charles III?
Well, I thought it would be, just a wonderful day, but a normal investiture, and then to hear that it was the king was a big thrill for me and my parents and my son. And because of the order in which things were done, I happened to be the first bloke who was being dealt with. Lady Sainsbury had the DBE first, quite right too, and then I was the number 2. And it dawned upon me that I was the first man to be knighted by the king as king.
And did he say something to you? Did you have a little chat?
Oh yes, we have our chats when we see each other, and I have to say that I think nobody is better prepared to be king than this monarch. It's not just a question of waiting. He's prepared for this, and I get the sense that there is a serious sense of purpose. He's taking the job incredibly seriously.
I mean, we saw that yesterday. It looked so solemn, didn't
Well, he
he?
did, and it's a solemn ceremony. It's a religious ceremony laden with huge symbolism, that has been laid down through the centuries. Of course you're going to take it seriously. But what I like about the king is that he's also able to not to take himself seriously and laugh at things and have
Same
that.
with the Queen Camilla, actually.
Absolutely.
They take the work seriously, but not themselves.
Yes, and that sense of humour, I think, carries them through their onerous public duties. I mean, who'd want that job?
No.
It's a job like no other, and it's a job that he's now, I think, ideally equipped to do.
I mean, you're a long-standing politician. Does it matter that he has expressed some pseudo-political views in the past, that we know what he thinks about all manner of things, be it architecture, the built environment, the environment in general? I mean, it's different to the Queen's approach, the late Queen's approach, isn't it?
Well, yes, but before he became king, he was interviewed some years ago in which he clearly stated that he knew that the job of being king was somewhat different from his previous role, and I think he accepted that, he acknowledged that, and everything that he's doing shows that he understands that the role of a constitutional monarch is a limited one, inevitably, but there are important functions. I think Bagehot described it in the 19th century as to encourage, to advise and to warn, and I'm sure that when it comes to this Prime Minister and future Prime Ministers, that's what the King will do.
And what's all this we hear about? A little bit of argy-bargy over who was invited yesterday, Robert. One former cabinet minister's there, one isn't. Boris Johnson and Carrie are front row. Some members of the cabinet are sat further back. Was there a little bit of competition over these invitations?
Well, look, I think a lot of us felt that we'd love to have been there, but there were only 2,000 seats.
So was it wrong? Should all of the MPs in the House of Commons have been there?
Well, look, in 1953 there were 8,000 seats, but they built tiers and stadiums. If you look at Westminster Abbey, then they closed it for 6 months to rebuild it into some sort of Wembley Stadium. Clearly, that wasn't going to be possible this time, and therefore I think we all have to accept that it's right for the Buckingham Palace to make sure, and the Earl Marshal, to make sure there's a very good cross-representation of our society. And I think yesterday that was achieved in spades. You know, you look at that congregation, and I thought there was a great sort of sense that civic society and people more generally were being well represented across the country through all the organisations that were there in the Abbey. And you know, that's fine. And none of us should carp and quibble about that. This is a state occasion, showing Britain off to the world. I thought we did it very well.
And do you think it perhaps sets the Republican cause back a bit? We have seen quite a lot of polling this week. We know about the protests, which I'm going to ask you about in your capacity as a former Justice Secretary in just a moment. But obviously there's a kind of rising Republican sentiment among the under 30s, and that's been problematic for the monarchy in the past and could continue to be so. Do displays like this perhaps push the dial back in their favour?
I think they do. I think none of us, apart from our parents' and grandparents' generation, have seen a coronation. It was a great moment for people to actually view the symbolism and what it's all about. And I think that will have convinced a lot of people that whilst there are quirks and imperfections quite clearly in a constitutional monarchy, what's the alternative? President Blair?
Yes.
I think not.
President Lineker?
I think not.
But why are the Tories a bit shy about all this? You know, meant to be the party of patriotism. You've got people in the opposition who want to scrap the monarchy. Surely you should be waving the Union flag at every opportunity, because of the representation here indicating that the not just silent majority, the cheering majority are in favour of this institution.
Well, yeah, do you know, I think actually not just the Conservative Party, but mainstream politics is in favour of the monarchy, and I think it has more power when actually it's people from all parties who are standing up and saying this works, why change it? This represents not just our great history, but it's also a sustainable model for the future.
Yes.
And I think that sort of cross-party support, that wellspring of support for the monarchy will endure, and that's why yesterday was another great milestone in the history of this institution.
Yes.
But looking forward, I think, to, God willing, a successful reign and a great future with His Royal Highness the Prince of Wales.
Now, not everybody was in support. There was quite a few protests yesterday. People perfectly entitled to protest, I think, in a fair and open democracy.
Yes.
There were some arrests, more than 50, and Graham Smith, the head of Republic, the anti-monarchy campaign group, ended up being thrown in the back of a police van. What do we think? Do we think the police were a bit too heavy-handed? They were in Trafalgar Square. There was an issue over a megaphone that Graham planned to use, and also I think some clips on their clothing which were meant to be used for holding banners, but in fact the police misconstrued as perhaps them trying to chain themselves to railings. Over the top, or?
Well, look, you told me more than I knew before I came into the studio. I think the police have a very difficult job on the ground in operations to judge what might happen and what might not happen. Can you imagine what would have happened if they'd done nothing and then we'd had some obstruction on the parade, or worse?
So where's the line drawn between peaceful protests? I mean, does a megaphone change the situation? He's allowed to go in Trafalgar Square and shout against the monarchy on a megaphone, isn't he?
Well, yes, absolutely. And
when you look at Steve Bray's been doing it for years.
And when you look at the legislation, you've got inbuilt to it the fact that police have to take into account freedom of expression and weigh all these things up. This important right that we all have before taking action. Now,
but the Tories have been blamed for being overzealous with this legislation on protest. Do you think they're using a sledgehammer to crack a nut here?
No, I supported this legislation. In fact, I was the minister who helped put it through, and I think it was absolutely right we did so. Because I can tell you, we'd be up to for a lot of criticism. The police would be in the dock if they let something happen and the parade was obstructed, or worse, horses were frightened.
No, I know.
We can't. That's not safe.
Before you go, with time ticking, I must ask you about the local election results. I mean, the expectation management was at 1,000 because CCHQ obviously hoped it would be well below that. In fact, the losses of seats across England exceeded 1,000. It's an absolute disaster for the Tories, isn't it, Robert?
Well, look, it was a very bad day. I'm not going to gloss over it. I've seen days like this before, and I've seen how the Conservative Party learns and recovers from it. That's the key thing now. We've got to listen to what people are saying to us. We've got to do better, and we've got to press on. I think, Rishi's getting it right.
But
we
if
need
the
to
swing that
press on
happened
in
in
the fight against
Swindon
inflation.
on a local level was reciprocated when it comes to the general election, you'd lose your seat.
Well, I know that.
Do you think you're going to lose your seat?
No, I don't, because
You worried about it?
Of course I do, but I've never been complacent about my seat. I've never had a safe seat. My seat is a marginal one, always has been, which is why I work year in, year out with local residents to try and solve their problems and try and be a vigorous representative.
CCHQ up to scratch? Because I heard a lot of anecdotal evidence last week that the Tories weren't campaigning hard enough in key areas.
Well, locally we were working very, very hard on the ground. I think, just as we're learning lessons, I'm sure CCHQ will as well, and we'll be ready for that general election when it comes next year.
So, Robert Buckland, very, very much wonderful to see you this morning.
Thank you.
We might see you again later, but we'll keep that slightly secret. Now, lots more to come. After the break, I'm going to be speaking to Labour's Wes Streeting. I'll also be speaking to the Culture Secretary, Lucy Fraser, about everything involved in planning for the coronation, and I'll be joined by the late Queen's Press Secretary, Elsa Anderson. Don't go anywhere.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nana, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching. Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Saturday nights on GB News.
From 6 p.m, I'll give you my unique take on the world today.
Then at 7, it's me, Calvin Robinson, with my Common Sense Crusade.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
5 times the opinion. Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories.
With us 4, plus a special guest.
And at 9, of course, it's Mark Dolan Tonight.
Saturday nights on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to the Camilla Tominey Show Coronation Special, live from Buckingham Palace. I'm going to be speaking to Wes Streeting, the Shadow Health Secretary, in just a moment. Lucy Fraser, the Culture Secretary, also joins me. And I'll be speaking to Elsa Anderson, the late Queen's Press Secretary. Now, before Wes Streeting gets mic'd up, we're waiting for him to come on. I'm going to bring Eve Pollard back into the conversation. We didn't get to speak about the local election results, Eve. Do you think people are enthused by Rishi Sunak? It was interesting. My editor was in the coronation ceremony yesterday, and he said the only politician that really turned heads again is Boris Johnson. Everyone was craning to have a look at him and Carrie coming in because he's got that wow factor. You've got Sunak steadying the ship, but I don't know. Both leaders, I think, people find rather unconvincing.
I think that Boris is the great showman, but that didn't work. And Rishi doesn't have an ounce of showmanship in him. And I think we'd like to see him more. We'd like to... I mean, he vanished for the first 2 months.
But he was working hard behind the scenes.
He was, and
hard
he was getting...
Hard
work does get, like, the Northern Protocol and all the rest, North Ireland Protocol. But you need somebody to be there. And it's very difficult because he is a details man, and you do respect that. And he does get some things sorted out. And he's working very hard, as we know, on little boats coming over,
yes,
trying to get the economy going.
Yes.
But on the other hand, there are things that are driving people mad, like why can't we be a place that people come and buy their Chanel bags and save money and bring a load more tourists?
Yep.
Madness. I mean, and why does everything take...
business, the environment, that's
correct,
the problem.
and business, and also everything seems to take so long. I don't know whether he's got enough people to delegate, enough people to get on with it, but I don't seem to think that... You don't feel they've realised there's urgency about it.
But then... the trouble with... Oh, have we got Wes? I think we have got Wes now. I think Wes Streeting, the Labour's Shadow Health Secretary, does join us now. Wes, thank you very much for joining the show this morning. I'd love to know what you made of the coronation. Presumably you were glued to the ceremony as the rest of us were, Wes.
Yeah, sorry I'm running a bit late this morning. It's been a bit back-to-back. Wasn't avoiding you, but I was actually there. It was an amazing occasion. I felt very privileged. A small number of MPs from each party were able to be at the coronation itself, and it was just remarkable, to be honest. And at a time when lots of things in our country aren't working, it was great to see on display so many things that make this country great. The music, that even talking about it's given me goosebumps. The huge military processions down the Mall, the fly past, the coming together, the people packing the Mall, and I'm going to be out at street parties in my constituency in the next day or two as well. I hope the weather holds up. I thought it was brilliant, actually. It's wonderful, and the fact that I think 300 million people tuned in worldwide is a reminder of the soft power that the monarchy brings our country, and I genuinely don't think we would have seen something like that with a presidential election, for example.
Wes, doesn't it also show, though, how out of touch some of the Republicans in your party are? They're not very in tune with the public if they want to scrap a monarchy that literally millions of people turned out for in the Mall behind me.
They're also not very great in number, to be honest, and I say that with respect. And look, it's perfectly legitimate for people to say, oh, I'd want a republic, I'd want an elected head of state. It's not a view I agree with. It's not one the Labour Party agrees with. I mean, people should look back at where Attlee was. You know, we're in politics because we want to change people's lives, and I don't think people's lives would change for the better with an elected head of state. I think one of the things that the royal family is able to do is to bridge divides, actually, and we saw that yesterday with people coming together on a cross-party basis. I mean, you know, Penny Mordaunt almost stole the show as the sword bearer yesterday. With that, and, you know, people
Yes.
right across party boundaries were very praising of Penny, actually, and very proud of the way she conducted herself. But more than that, I mean, you know, I mentioned the Abbey. One of the nice things about yesterday was talking to people from all walks of life who were invited because of their community service, because of their public service, what they do for other people. And that was lovely. And, you know, ask anyone who's ever been to a royal visit or to a Buckingham Palace garden party. Those are really special moments that people remember for the rest of their lives. And I think there is that kind of stardust and magic you get around monarchy that you wouldn't get from an elected head of state.
Obviously, there are some who don't like the royal family. Monarchy isn't their cup of tea. What did you make, Wes, of the policing of the protesters yesterday? The CEO of Republic, the anti-monarchy campaign group, Graham Smith, got arrested. Did you think it was a bit overzealous?
Well, I don't know the circumstances of the arrest, and I think it's important. I've seen some of the statements coming out from the Metropolitan Police. I'm glad that they've recognised the importance of transparency and public accountability as the Metropolitan Police tries to rebuild trust after some pretty terrible headlines driven by even more shocking reports of misconduct. I think the police will reflect on yesterday and be open about what went well and what could have gone better, and we'll wait and see that. They recognise the public accountability. I don't doubt that yesterday was an enormous policing challenge, and not least because of the security risk of having so many dignitaries and heads of state and representatives from around the world coming together in one place. It was no mean feat, and so look, I don't think anyone is ever comfortable really with the idea of protesters being arrested unless it's of course justified. So the police will want to do that stuff around accountability. Let's wait and see what they say in terms of any arrests that took place. I actually think it's a great strength of our country that you had on the Mall thousands of people packing the Mall to celebrate the coronation, and literally a stone's throw away in Trafalgar Square you had people voicing their views for Republic and I don't think with any arrests there, and I think that's a great thing about a democracy. We can disagree, and we can disagree well.
Let's talk about democracy and local democracy, Wes. Now, the election results have been good for Labour, there's no denying that, but have they been good enough? You needed a 10% swing to make you the majority party in Parliament come 2024. You actually only got 5%. So what's gone wrong? You haven't done as well as you should have.
Camilla, Keir could literally be in the car to Downing Street as the Prime Minister of a majority Labour government, and people will still be saying, oh, difficult night for the Conservatives, but Labour could have done better. I think we had some remarkable results, the biggest swing since 1997. But I'll just make this point. We're confident we can win it. We're confident we can win a majority at the next election, but we're not complacent. We know, of course, there's more to do. But if you'd told me in 2019, after the worst election defeat since 1935, that we'd be seeing the kind of breakthroughs that we saw in every part of England, every corner of the country, I'm not sure I would have believed you, actually. And I'm, as you know, I'm always an optimist, but it's remarkable progress. But we're not taking people for granted. There is more to do, and for Labour, in terms of our manifesto, the best is yet to come.
Is it the truth, Wes, that you're going to have to borrow my bright yellow jacket and go into coalition with the Lib Dems to have any hope of Keir Starmer being Prime Minister in 2024?
I know that's what the Conservatives are going around saying, because their position on their results seems to be, oh, we didn't just lose seats to Labour, we lost seats to everyone, as if that was some sort of achievement on their part. I don't think that we're in that territory of looking to or needing a coalition. I do know the Conservatives are in trouble.
Would you go into coalition with the Lib Dems?
They are losing. We're not in that space, and we're not interested in a coalition with the Liberal Democrats. What we are working to is delivering a majority Labour government, and it's not just in England where we're winning back support. In Scotland too, where there weren't local elections on Thursday, but Labour is making serious ground under Anas Sarwar's leadership in Scotland, particularly given the SNP implosion. I think people in Scotland are now not just looking to Labour as a potential government in Westminster to get the Tories out, they're looking to Labour as a serious alternative for government in Scotland too, because they can compare Labour's record in government with the Tories' 13 years in Westminster and the SNP's 16 years in Scotland.
It's a great advert for your party. You're always a champion. I've got to grant it to you. Wes Streeting, thank you very much indeed for joining me this morning.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories.
Right, folks, that was a spicy one, wasn't it?
With us four, plus a special guest.
Sometimes she has to stick her foot in it. Sometimes she has to say things as they are.
Sometimes I think we should keep the refugees and send the pensioners to Rwanda. Then we'd be in a much better state.
Well, Benjamin, that is
The Saturday 5. Saturday nights from 8. Only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Britain is watching.
Lucy Fraser, the Secretary of State for Digital, Culture, Media and Sport, the Tory MP for South East Cambridge, joins me here. Thank you very much for coming to see us today. It's a bit chilly. You're looking gorgeous in your pink dress. I know we need blankets. This is the trouble with an outdoor broadcast. Now, you're at the coronation yesterday. Of course, you would be as Culture Secretary. Tell us all about it. Where were you seated? What was the highlight for you, Lucy?
Oh, it was such a phenomenal event. I mean, this was Britain on the world stage, and we did a fantastic spectacle that no one like Britain can do. It was. I thought the coronation itself, the service, the whole event was really spectacular.
What was your favourite part?
So there were so many bits, because that was like true tradition, which was fantastic to see. I really enjoyed the procession coming into the Abbey, because we saw Princess Charlotte holding Prince Louis's hand and her looking after him. That was fantastic. But at the same time, we saw religious leaders, heads of state wearing their traditional clothes, and I just thought it was a fantastic celebration and a moment of international unity.
And obviously DCMS were absolutely central to the planning. You pleased with how it went? I mean, it went without a hitch, I think, from your perspective.
Yes.
There was a bit of a problem with the timings. I think the King arrived 6 minutes too early at the Abbey. Did it matter?
I don't think it mattered. You're right, my department has done a huge amount of work to ensure that the coronation went smoothly. And I think I was so proud when I was there, sitting there. I was proud to be British. And I know a lot of people felt that too.
Now,
and
were you proud to be a Tory woman observing your friend and colleague, Penny Mordaunt? Tell us about how she prepared for that. And did politicians realise, because the public didn't, that she would play such a central role?
I thought she did an amazing job. She was so fabulous. So I spoke to her before it actually, so I knew she was playing an important role, and she was there for the whole time. But I didn't appreciate how heavy the sword would be, you know, what exercises she'd had to have done in order to ensure she could do that. But I thought she did a fantastic job.
Yeah, you won't be taking her on in an arm wrestling contest.
Absolutely not.
Anytime
no,
soon,
definitely not.
And what did you think about the police handling of the protesters? There were over 50 arrests. Graham Smith, the head of Republic, as we've said already, he got arrested by police. A bit over the top. There have been concerns about the Conservatives' policies on protests, that this new legislation, it's a sledgehammer to crack a nut. They're actually impinging on people's right and freedom to campaign against things like the monarchy.
So you will know that the police are operationally independent.
Yes.
And you mentioned the legislation we brought through. I think it's absolutely right that we did that. I think we've seen a shift in recent years in how people are protesting. It's absolutely right. People have a right to protest. We live in a democracy. It's an important part of our democracy. But what we've seen is them disrupting day-to-day operations of people's lives, stopping them going to hospital, stopping them going to school, stopping them using major motorways and commuting to work. And I think we need to redress that balance, and that's why we've brought in legislation. We brought in some legislation, and the police said they needed more powers, so we've given them and I think then the police have to use their operational powers, their intelligence, to make the right decisions and the right calls on the day.
I'm really interested in your take on the royals as a family. You've obviously got a front row seat yesterday. How was Prince Harry received as he entered the Abbey?
I think what was fabulous about that event is that it was a huge family moment. It wasn't just Prince Harry, but obviously there was Queen Camilla's family there, as well as the royal family, the King's family.
Yes.
And I think that was lovely to see.
And did you think the balcony show, that idea actually of it being representative of blended families in Britain, is a good thing? I mean, we've commented with some of the other contributors today that back in the 90s, the idea of Queen Camilla would have been anathema to a lot of people, and now here she is with the crown on her head alongside the king. Is that an image that you thought we'd ever see in our lifetimes?
I think what we see, and what we saw in so many different aspects of the coronation, was tradition at the same time as modernity. And I think that the king really wanted to ensure that was the case. So there were some changes to the service, bringing it more up to date, specifically, for example, in relation to religious leaders. We had chairs that were restored, that had been part of previous coronations. We had both songs that had been part of the coronation since the coronation first took place, as well as new songs as well. So the anthem, which was composed by Andrew Lloyd Webber. So I think what we saw today is a monarchy that understands tradition, but also understands that it needs to keep pace with modern time.
You've mentioned keeping pace. Are you keeping pace with your own voters? Because the local elections, let's be honest, have been a disaster for the Conservatives. The damage limitation was that you'd lose 1,000 seats. You've lost more than that, and presumably you were hoping to lose fewer. What's gone wrong?
Well, first of all, I'd say it's really sad to see local councillors who've worked really hard for their local communities.
Of course, but
whether they're Conservatives or Labour, lose their seat. Look, I'm not going to pretend that wasn't a difficult result for us as Conservatives, but we've been in power for 13 years. And we've got to think about the context in which that local election took place. And the context is we've just come out of a pandemic. People are struggling with the cost of living. We're still in the war with Ukraine, which we are quite rightly supporting.
But a Conservative government should be well placed to provide solutions to those problems. And actually people think you're being unconservative, not least with your high tax policies, not least with your business taxes. We've had complaints about the VAT on luxury goods in London particularly. So there's a sense that you're not really doing what you should do, not doing what you say on the tin, that that's why you're losing support. There's even a story in The Observer to say that you're losing support among Brexiteers in the Red Wall. That suggests, along with the likes of losing Windsor, that it's all going very, very badly wrong for you.
I think we are doing what people want us to do. And
but you can't be, Lucy, because they're not voting for you in the locals.
Well, I think we've had a really difficult few years. I'm not going to pretend that the last few years haven't been very challenging for the party. But now I think we have some stability. So the Prime Minister has been in place for only 6 months. And I think he is focusing on, rightly, the things that people are talking to us about on the doorstep. And the biggest thing that people are finding difficulty with is the cost of living. And so what the Prime Minister is focusing on, quite rightly, is inflation. Well, the biggest tax cut that we can give people is to get inflation under control, because that affects them on a day-to-day basis.
I mean, he wants to halve it by the end of the year, and it's not quite coming down as fast as it should. Meanwhile, people are facing sky-high prices in the supermarkets. Food inflation is much higher than 10%. It's about 25%. So when's this all going to be happening?
So we have seen inflation come down, and it is projected...
Not enough, though.
Well, it's projected to fall to just over 2.9% by the end of the years. So I think then people will see a change in their day-to-day living. I think what we need to do is make sure that we deliver on those promises that we've made, and I think we've started to deliver. And I must say, just knocking on doors throughout the local election campaign, I do feel that people are starting to give us the opportunity to show them that we can deliver. And I think when we have, I think then we earn the right for them to trust us.
Rishi Sunak only went to Darlington, which is about 5 minutes from his own constituency in Richmond. Why didn't he travel more? There's criticisms of CCHQ not campaigning hard enough in the areas that you really need to win. Why are you having a lacklustre response to what is a real crisis in your party and in government?
Well, I would refute that we're not campaigning hard. I think we campaigned very strongly throughout the country, and it was great to see the Prime Minister and his wife out on the campaign trail.
The campaign was launched in secret in Wolverhampton. The media weren't even invited. Lots of people didn't even know that you were campaigning. So, you know, we go to villages, we see it with our own eyes. It's kind of, there's painted with a sea of yellow, like my jacket by the Lib Dems. The Tories are invisible. That's not good campaigning.
I would totally refute that. I think we were fighting on the ground, and that's what's important. What we need to do in an election is talk to people, and I went to a number of constituencies, not just my own, during the course of the campaign. You're wearing your yellow jacket. My constituency was at risk from a Lib Dem threat. I think they thought they would take it. They did not. We still control the council. So I think on the ground, I think we've seen, in different areas of the country, great local campaigns.
Okay, Culture Secretary Lucy Fraser, thank you so much for joining me, not least after such a busy day yesterday. Lovely to see you.
Thank you.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Hello, I'm Calvin Robinson. Do not miss my Common Sense Crusade Saturdays at 7 p.m. Join me for some in-depth discussions on faith. Is that not the start of the slippery slope?
It's very much so.
And the big moral questions of the day. I'm baffled.
You've got some nerve.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to the Camilla Tominey Show, a coronation special live from Buckingham Palace. Now, I've got the best guest, because Ailsa Anderson wasn't only Communications Secretary to the late Queen, but she was also Director of Communications to Justin Welby, the Archbishop of Canterbury. So presumably, Ailsa, you were looking at this from both angles yesterday. Tell me what were your highlights of the ceremony?
Oh, my golly, Camilla, there were so many. I have to say, yeah, I thought the Archbishop was 10 out of 10.
Yes, he didn't
in terms
put
of
a foot wrong.
He was, and I know he would have been worried. I know he would have been praying the night before.
Yes.
And having his own personal space to, to ensure that everything went well. And he would rehearse and rehearse and rehearse. He's a perfectionist, like the King. They're both perfectionists.
Yes.
And it was interesting. I saw one of the headlines saying, basically, well done us, didn't we do well? The King would not have ever said that. He would be worrying about, tiny bits that may have gone wrong.
Yes.
Have I let anyone down? Have I delivered for the public? I am here.
Is that how he thinks?
Yes, I do think. He said yesterday, I am here to serve. I'm here not to be served upon. And that was very similar to the Archbishop's sermon yesterday as well. So it's very much about service, community, what I can give to you rather than what you can give to me, which I think is, especially in today's society, I think that's just so key.
Yes, absolutely. Now, you say there wasn't a hitch. There was a slight hitch, which you must have noticed as well, because I'm very familiar with how you all plan things. You just have those little books, they're down to the last minute.
Absolutely.
What happened? The Diamond Jubilee State Coach arrives at Westminster Abbey, and then he's held in a fixed point for 5 minutes. You can see the door opening. He has a chat with the Crown Equerry. He doesn't look too happy, Ailsa. How does this happen? I thought these things were planned to the very second.
Well, never work with children and animals, I think, Camilla, is the key there. And you're dealing with horses. And you say he didn't look too happy. I just think he was nervous, and he's had a lot on his mind. Because I think I've said to you before, what members of the royal family normally like more than anything is a hitch to happen, is something that's not going to go according to plan, something that's going to be amusing that they can talk about afterwards. So I think it would be more, not an annoyance, but actually, the eyes of the world are on us. We've got to make sure this is absolutely perfection, minute by minute. And obviously it wasn't, but I'm sure they will laugh about it in retrospect.
Now, obviously, you worked in very close quarters with the couple. Can you just give us your impressions of them as individuals? I know it's a professional working relationship, but you must have got to know them relatively well. What's the King like? What's the Queen like?
I think the King has that sense of extraordinary duty that he got from his mother. I think he's kind, he's generous, he's thoughtful, he's spiritual. You hear the stories that never get publicised. Andrew Lloyd Webber said yesterday that he sent him 2 personal letters.
Yes.
When his son died recently, there was a royal photographer whose wife died last year, and again the King and the Queen sent personal letters of condolence, which are never publicised, but it's just those little things that people don't hear about, which show actually they've got a huge heart and they're incredibly compassionate. What I love about the Queen is her extraordinary warmth. Yes. And she's so down to earth, and I think she wasn't born to this life, and yet she has grown into it. I love the causes that she champions. Children's literature, domestic abuse on women, is things that are maybe not too sexy in the eyes of the media, but actually she has put a spotlight on those, and she's giving them the publicity that they really need.
You mentioned the media there. Obviously, you're a communications guru, and I was going to ask you about the PR effort to restore the reputations of Charles and Camilla. We can think back to the 90s, particularly the Queen was public enemy #1. There is something slightly surreal about seeing them both wearing crowns on the balcony behind us. Is that because of an enormous PR effort, or is it because of who they are as individuals and people actually going, do you know what? It might have not been the perfect and most auspicious start. They don't want to be disloyal to Princess Diana, but at the same time, this couple have grown on people.
I think nobody knows what goes on inside a marriage, Camilla. I'm divorced, no one knows, so, and people are very, very quick to judge. So there are always 2 sides of every story. Was it a deliberate, proactive media campaign? I wasn't around then, I don't know. I can only say what I see for them as individuals, and I just see, the extraordinary work and dedication and duty and humility that they both possess. And those people who meet them, and I've spoken to people who meet them, and they say that you see them on a walkabout, the king on a walkabout, he probably spends far more time chatting to people than he should do, and he's probably chivied around, by his staff, because he's genuinely interested in what people have to say. He's curious. He's generous with his time. And I think people just see more and more of that now that, they are king and queen.
And that chemistry between them is really important. Tell us a bit about the dynamic of their relationship. I felt that it was played out to perfection during Fountain Pen Gate. I don't know what they're both like behind palace gates when things go wrong, which aren't funny, but obviously the fountain pen deeply irritated him. She was there to calm and soothe. Is that what you've observed as far as how they relate to each other?
I think it could be a bit of yin and yang. I think he may be the Eeyore to her Tigger.
Yes.
Where he says, why are people saying this? Why is this happening? he is a perfectionist. He is a workaholic. And she will sort of chivvy him along and say, look, darling, don't worry about that. We've got this to do now. And, she's sort of very much jollying him. And, people, who knows how relationships work?
Yes. But it would have been a sorry state of affairs yesterday to see him crowned alone.
Yeah, oh, totally. Yeah. It would almost remind one of the Queen, the late Queen, at Prince Philip's funeral.
Yes.
Again, alone, without
Cutting a
your
lonely
partner.
figure.
Everyone, I can't think of anyone who didn't say how sorrowful that looked on cameras. So I totally agree with you. Him being crowned monarch on his own, and it's a massive job. My goodness, being head of state to 15 realms, including the United Kingdom, it's huge.
And some of the imagery of Kate is just stunning. I felt she couldn't have looked more regal.
Yes.
She looked like a queen in waiting, didn't she, Elsa?
She looked beautiful. She's magnificent. And she's like that behind the scenes
Is
too,
she? What's she
Camilla.
like? Because people are so intrigued by her because she doesn't speak up all that often. She remains a little bit like the late Queen in that she's an enigma. And yet I know women are quite obsessed by her. I know all my girlfriends are like, what's she really like? What is she like?
Well, when I've seen her in private, she is kindness personified and generous with her time. I remember her coming into our press office in Buckingham Palace and having a tour around and meeting the team shortly after the wedding, basically just to say thank you. Now, she didn't have to do that, but she did. And for those people who worked very, very hard during the royal wedding in 2012, that was 2011. That was extraordinarily kind. And, that little bit of stardust, that magic, will stay with people forever.
Of course. Now, let's talk about the spares, because I know you also worked closely with both Prince Harry and the Duke of York. Let's deal with Harry first of all. I mean, do you think the firm, so to speak, managed that situation okay? I mean, obviously he was relegated to the third row. He was obscured by the Princess Royal's feathered hat. I mean, from a PR perspective, Elsa, how do you think that all played out?
Relegated to the third row, I think people might bite your right arm off to be in the third row of Westminster Abbey, to be watching a coronation of a king. I think it was wonderful that he came. I really do. I thought he looked relaxed when he walked into the Abbey. He was smiling at people. He was chatting to his cousins. I thought it was lovely. And just there to show support to his father.
Not much support, though.
And
So, I mean,
stepmother.
he's there for a few minutes. He doesn't seem to speak to anyone
two
apart
hours.
from...
2 hours is not a few minutes, Camilla.
I know, but he had no interaction at all with Prince William. He didn't seem to have much interaction at all with his father. You've got this juxtaposed situation of a brother on one hand pledging to be the liege man of life and limb and having a kiss on the cheek of the king, and then you have the other brother heading back to Heathrow as soon as the crown's been placed upon the royal head.
Well, he didn't have a part to play because he's not the heir apparent.
Elsa Anderson, thank you so much for joining me this morning.
you.
Lovely to see you. Now, can you imagine receiving an email and then an invitation on your map to go to the coronation if you're just an ordinary member of the public? I mean, I say ordinary, but Robert Honegger is the owner of Humdinger's Catering, and they were one of the few members of the public who were invited to the coronation ceremony. Robert, tell us why you were invited.
Well, I was invited because we did this soup kitchen and food bank on Hoxton Street.
Yes.
So we fed lots of people, and we fed the Royal London Hospital, and we helped out lots of other hospitals as well for kind of morale. And things that you get in the right.
And you were one of several hundred British Empire medalists to be invited.
Yes.
And were you all seated together? What kind of view did you have, Robert?
I had a fantastic view.
Did you? Tell us everything about that.
I was 2 rows back in the middle, underneath the kind of underneath one of the biggest pillars, so no one could sit there.
Oh, good.
So I could step to one side when we were standing, so the people behind me could see.
Well, Robert, you've had a great time. You've had a great weekend. Thank you very much for sharing all the details with us this morning. Now, Robert Buckland, we are bringing you back in because we've decided to do something a little bit special. This is our last outdoor broadcast from Buckingham Palace, and as well as being a top politician, Sir Robert Buckland has got quite a unique skill. Tell us a little about what you do and how you do it.
Well, I do like bursting into song at random moments.
It's very Welsh of you, if I may say.
Well, I know I'm fitting the stereotype really, really well, am I not? But I've been singing since I was a kid, and
I be comfortable. We're going to stand just out of respect. Sir Robert Buckland, take it away, please.
God save our gracious King, long live our noble King. God save the King, send him victorious, happy and glorious, long to reign over us. God save the King.
Wonderful.
Robert, that was absolutely wonderful. Thank you so much for doing that for us. Well, thank you so much for joining us this week. We've had quite the royal time of it at Buckingham Palace. Of course, we're going to be back next week at 9:30 as usual. But up next, it's Arlene Foster.
Hello there, I'm Greg Dewhurst and welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast. Well, it's all changed again after a fairly bright Sunday. We've got rain moving in tonight and spreading east through Monday. We can see at the bigger picture, ridge of high pressure brought us the dry weather for many of us through Sunday, but it is all change, as you can see. Weather fronts moving in from the Atlantic, bringing outbreaks of rain and brisk winds too. The rain already moving in this evening across western parts of the UK, Northern Ireland, eventually western coasts of Scotland, England and Wales. Some of this rain could be heavy at times. The best of the drier weather holding on across the far east and southeast, but increasing cloud here. Not a cold night at all. Temperatures remaining in double figures right across the country. It's a bit of a grey start across many parts. Monday morning outbreaks of rain for western parts of England and Wales. This sweeping its way slowly eastwards. Could be heavy at times. Best of the brightness holding on to East Anglia for the longest. Sunshine returning behind the rain, but also some heavy showers. These will be thundery across Northern Ireland. Could lead to some localised flooding. Temperatures lower compared to Sunday, but still in any brighter spells reaching close to 20 Celsius. Into the evening, England and Wales cloudy with further outbreaks of rain, which could be heavy at times. The blustery showers across parts of Scotland, Northern Ireland should ease as we move into the early hours. But overnight, generally into Tuesday morning, it stays quite cloudy. There will still be some bits and pieces of rain around, and temperatures, well, again with the cloud holding up in double figures for many of us. So it means a grey start again Tuesday morning. Best of the bright spells across the north and the west. The east cloudier here, particularly across northeast Scotland with rain and drizzle through the morning. Into the afternoon we will see some heavy showers across eastern parts of the UK, whilst in the west further heavy showers move in here. And again, in any sunshine, temperatures lifting, stays unsettled Wednesday and Thursday, further rain and showers.
First and foremost, I'm a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nana, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Saturday nights on